All right, let's dive into one of the most famous mysteries in the world, the Bermuda Triangle. It's this legendary place of fear, bizarre stories, and things that just vanish. But what's the real story hiding behind the myth?
To really get this whole legend, we have to start with the one story that basically created it. It all goes back to December 5th, 1945, and a totally routine training mission that was known as Flight 19.
I mean, just look at how fast everything went wrong. At 2:10 in the afternoon, 5 bombers, 14 guys, take off from Florida. Weather's perfect. But then, not even 2 hours later, the flight leader, a super experienced pilot, radios in that both of his compasses are dead. The radio calls get more and more confusing. The leader thinks they're way off course over the Gulf of Mexico, but some of his crew think they're exactly where they're supposed to be. And as it gets dark and the weather turns ugly, the radio just goes silent. Then, in the final, unbelievable twist, the massive search plane they send out to find them, it disappears too.
Now, you'd think an incident like that, even one that cost 27 lives, would be a horrible, tragic fluke. But nope, it became the cornerstone for a legend that was much bigger and way more terrifying.
So when we talk about the triangle, we're talking about this massive, 500,000 square mile patch of ocean. It's roughly sketched out between Bermuda, Puerto Rico, and Florida. And here's the crazy part. It doesn't exist on any official map. But in our culture, it's become ground zero for anything and everything that can't be explained.
And these stories, believe it or not, go back for centuries. Even Christopher Columbus, way back in 1492, wrote in his logbook about his compass going haywire and seeing a strange ball of fire fall into the sea right in this area. Over the next few hundred years, it got all kinds of spooky nicknames like the Graveyard of the Atlantic. But the name we all know today wasn't even a thing until 1964, when a writer named Vincent Gaddis finally connected the dots between all these disappearances and called it the Deadly Bermuda Triangle.
And some of those disappearances, they were just on another level. Take a look at this number, 306. That's not the total number of victims over the years. That is the number of people who were lost in a single incident.
Yeah, this was the USS Cyclops, and we're not talking about a small boat. This was one of the biggest, fastest ships in the whole U.S. Navy at the time. In March 1918, it's sailing from the West Indies with 306 souls on board and thousands of tons of cargo. The weather was beautiful, it sent one last routine message, and then it was never seen or heard from again. Just gone.
And then you get the stories that are just plain bizarre, like the legend of the Ellen Austin from way back in 1881. The story goes, it finds another ship just drifting along, in perfect condition, but with nobody on it. So the captain puts a small crew on the ghost ship to sail it back to port. A storm rolls in, they get separated for a couple of days, and when they find the ship again, the new crew is gone too. It's an absolutely chilling story. Now, to be fair, this one is so old it's pretty much considered a tall tale, but still, it gives you the creeps, right?
So, okay, with stories like that, it's no wonder people start talking about aliens and sea monsters. But what happens if we push all that sensational stuff aside for a minute and just look for the scientific answers? Let's start with magnetism. Remember how the compasses on Flight 19 and even Columbus's ship just went completely bonkers? Well, the answer might not be supernatural. It might be something called an agonic line.
So, here's a little-known fact. Earth has 2 north poles. There's the geographic one, the actual tippy top of the planet, and then there's the magnetic North Pole, which is where your compass needle actually points, and they're not in the same place. Now, good navigators know how to correct for this, but the Bermuda Triangle happens to be one of the very few places on Earth where those 2 norths can line up perfectly. So if a pilot isn't careful, it can easily throw their navigation way off and send them hundreds of miles off course.
Then you've just got the environment itself, which is honestly a nightmare. The area has these huge stretches of water that look really deep but are actually dangerously shallow, perfect for ripping the bottom out of a ship. It's a total hurricane hotspot, getting battered by some of the most violent weather on Earth. On top of all that, you have the Gulf Stream. It's like a powerful river inside the ocean that can sweep away any sign of a wreck in just a matter of hours.
And then there's this theory which sounds like something from a movie but is totally based in science: methane hydrates. Just imagine huge fields of frozen methane gas on the ocean floor. If one of those suddenly erupts, it sends up a massive plume of gas bubbles. For any ship sailing overhead, the water would suddenly become frothy and lose all its density. The ship would lose all its buoyancy and just drop. It would sink in seconds, with no warning, leaving absolutely nothing behind. It's plausible, even though it's never been officially blamed for any specific sinking.
So, we've got killer currents, weird magnetic fields, and monster weather. But what if the biggest reason this legend is still so popular isn't out there in the ocean at all, but inside our own heads.
This brings us to a really cool psychological trick our brains play on us. It's called the Bader-Meinhof effect, or the frequency illusion. It's basically the reason we start to see patterns everywhere, even when they don't actually exist. I'm sure this has happened to you. You buy a new car, right? Let's say it's a blue pickup truck. All of a sudden, you see blue pickup trucks everywhere, on the highway and parking lots, driving by your house. Did everyone just go out and buy the same truck? No, of course not. They were always there. Your brain just finally started noticing them.
And that is exactly what many experts believe happened with the Bermuda Triangle. Once that catchy name and the spooky idea were planted in our heads, our brains started paying extra attention to any accident that happened inside those imaginary borders. We assign them some special, mysterious meaning, while totally ignoring similar tragedies that happen in other parts of the world all the time.
Okay, so after all the legends, all the science, and all the psychology, what's the bottom line? What's the official verdict from the people who actually monitor our oceans for a living? Well, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, could not be clearer about this. They say there is absolutely zero evidence that mysterious disappearances happen more often in the Bermuda Triangle than in any other busy part of the ocean.
And the U.S. Coast Guard says the exact same thing. They've reviewed all the incidents over the years and found no weird, extraordinary factors at all. In fact, as far as they're concerned, the Bermuda Triangle as a hazardous place doesn't even officially exist.
So when you boil it all down, the reality is actually pretty simple. The so-called mystery really just comes down to probability. This is one of the busiest travel routes in the entire world, for both ships and planes. It's also an area that gets slammed by hurricanes. And when you mix a ton of traffic with a ton of bad weather, you're just going to get more incidents. It's not paranormal, it's just math.
And that really leaves us with one final thing to think about. The Bermuda Triangle is an amazing story, a powerful modern legend that was built from real tragedy, a few coincidences, and our own fascination with the unknown. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other myths, born from a little bit of fact and a whole lot of fiction, do we all accept as truth today?